Alright, shut up, you guys. I want to talk about Final Destination. Final Destination! I don't know what that was. Alright, I did it. I watched all 6 Final Destination movies in 1 month, which is especially impressive because I was also under pressure from multiple people to watch all 8 Mission Impossible movies. Don't be friends with straight men, you guys. Certainly not more than one. I had previously touched on the Final Destination series and its depiction of death as an entity in my The Monkey video, specifically how it portrays death as a force controlled by order and rules as opposed to something controlled by randomness, like the titular The Monkey or a 13-year-old girl on MSN in 2005. But having either revisited or viewed for the first time every Final Destination film in wake of the new film, Bloodlines, I realized that its version of death is much more than just a brainless force abiding by certain pre-written rules like gravity or Eurovision. Death is, at its core, an overworked employee. In this video, I am going to dissect the actions and motivations of death in the Final Destination films through the lens of a guy just trying to make a goddamn living and not get fired. In this scenario, this entity has been assigned the specific role of creating a plan to eliminate each human at a predetermined time and then implementing these actionable items. This guy is answering to someone. Maybe it's God, maybe it's fate, maybe it's the alpha death, but one thing is for sure, there are Zoom one-on-ones. Final Destination 1. Death is the supernatural equivalent of a college graduate who has just lucked into his dream job, doing little cosmic murders. He knows he is equipped and ready for this job, and what's more, he is going to do it with more pizzazz and passion than anyone who has come before him while still meeting his quota. When Alex Browning has his vision of Flight 180 going down in flames and saves several designated non-survivors, Death is not ruffled. In fact, he's pleased with the opportunity to demonstrate that no one is going to slip through his fingers, and will all meet their end with an unprecedented amount of artistic vision. See, the first Final Destination film was not one I had seen all the way through, and in watching it, I noticed how spooky Death is in this one. He is not afraid to get supernatural with it, from the liberal use of the iconic wind foreshadowing to skulls and other scary imagery throughout to water slowly slinking its way back into pipes once it had done its job of literally slipping up a helpless teen. Death in Final Destination 1 has style. He is naive enough to think he will always have the time and energy for it. Cut to Final Destination 2. This film begins with Death in a not ideal position where he is still waiting out the final survivor of Flight 180, Clear Rivers, who has locked herself in a psych ward and is being a real Karen about dying. You would think that a mental hospital would be the perfect place to send someone off with an ooky spooky death, but Clear is being very meticulous about not letting anything dangerous enter her padded cell. Meanwhile, another premonition has set off another chain of survivors, but not just any survivors. These are people who are only alive because the survivors of Flight 180 lived long enough to cause a butterfly effect that put off their death. These are people who are alive because of not just one, but 2 of Death's oversights. While the survivors are freaking out about the nature of Death's designs, Death is scrambling a little bit. He starts out this chain of deaths by smashing a car full of college kids that were supposed to die last, so time to switch gears and work backwards, I guess. Then one of the survivors just blatantly starts trying to kill himself out of order, which is so rude. So Death's just gotta block the bullets in his gun. It's not elegant, it's not ooky spooky, it's Death's first time just having to be completely practical about achieving his goals. I think if you've ever gotten a job where you were excited to come in and shake things up, you may be familiar with this moment, where you realize that maybe all those that came before you did things a certain mundane way, not because they lacked your drive or vision, but because sometimes life just gets in the way. And life do be getting in the way of death. It's kind of its whole thing. Death does receive one boon from this group, and that it's that they misunderstand resident creepy dude William Bloodworth when he advises them that only new life can stop death, and they waste precious time ensuring that a pregnant lady stays safe long enough to deliver her child. As we learn in Bloodlines, giving birth will not interrupt death's plans for you. In fact, it will just put your baby on his list as another soul who isn't even supposed to be here. And on top of that, it turns out the lady wasn't on the original list. I feel like we are missing a precious deleted scene where Officer Burke has to explain to his colleague why he had him arrest an innocent pregnant woman, only for him to have to become her birthing partner when her water breaks in his holding cell. Unfortunately for Death, the final two survivors, including Officer Let's Arrest a Pregnant Woman, do find a way to cheat the list, making this the first screw-up our boy can't unscrew. And this is the beginning of Death becoming permanently disillusioned with his career. Final Destination 3. Now, speaking out of universe, this film is so quintessentially mid-2000s, and not just because of the flip phones, digital cameras, and swoopy straightened bangs, but because this is the entry where they really start trying to compete with the Saws and the Hostels in terms of body horror. Also, barely legal titties. In universe, I view this as Death doing away with the elegant and subtle supernatural vibes that he thought would be his calling card at the beginning of his career. In light of two of his victims surviving the last film, he is now trimming the fat and using what's already at his disposal to be as efficient, although not necessarily as clean, as possible. Goodbye, spooky skulls and windows. Hello, rusty screws and OSHA violations. And again, titties. And this new hard-ass persona is visible not only in the nature of the deaths, but in how unlenient he is as his victims fight their fate. By the end of the film, it feels like there have been enough shenanigans with the Order and the various survivors saving one another that maybe it's all a wash, and our final 3 roller coaster riders will make it through. And maybe Death from a few years ago would have gotten lost in all this extra bureaucracy, but Death today has learned to be meticulous. And so he lets the 3 rest just long enough for them to let their guard down, and then takes them out in one fell swoop in a subway nightmare. Or as I like to call it, just another day on the TTC, am I right, ladies? That's what the transit system is called here in Toronto. Public transit is bad, is the joke. Final Destination 4, or officially, The Final Destination. Actually, can I say something real quick? Franchises? Can we just talk over here to the side real quick? You gotta stop fucking with your naming conventions. If you started with numbers, just keep doing numbers. And you certainly can't get away with just adding a "the." I hated that for The Suicide Squad, and that was actually a good movie, unlike this movie, which is worse than Mission Impossible 2, which is a thing I know now. The only thing worse than adding the is not adding the and thinking you've come far enough in your series to just name it the same title again, like Halloween in 2018. You want to make the Halloween series more difficult to navigate? Kevin had to make me a chart. And don't do the cutesy thing where you put the numbers somewhere in the middle of the word. I'm looking at you, Scream. You're guilty of most of these. If Scream 7 ends up being the Scream, I'm gonna scream. So, Final Destination 4. Out of universe, very lazy movie. It relies on gore and gross out similarly to the third, but with way worse characters and death scenarios that are simultaneously less interesting and less believable. I don't think I left this viewing experience with one new irrational phobia, and isn't that kind of the point of these? In universe, though, this is far from Death's laziest moment. This is a Death who has enough experience to know how to make the system work for him. One question that comes up in almost any discussion about this series is, what are these premonitions? Who's sending them? Is it a force trying to thwart Death, or is it Death itself? Well, I'm here to tell you the premonitions are an Excel spreadsheet. Not literally, like Death isn't actually inputting his project's budget into a premonition, but you know when you first use Excel and you have no idea what you're doing and there are all these weird little quirks, like how it'll automatically register certain things as dates, or you press one thing and suddenly everything's wrong? These are the premonitions when Death first takes on the job. They're a part of the system he's dealing with, he's expected to work with them, but they're just a huge pain in the ass. In Final Destination 4, ya boy has learned formulas, meaning that he's got enough control over the premonitions that he can actually utilize them to make his job easier. Because as we learn at the end of the movie, he was always meant to take Nick and his friends out exactly when he does. They escape the NASCAR pileup thanks to Nick's vision, seemingly so he could save all those people at the mall. Death must have had different plans for them. Maybe they were all going to go on to cause deaths that were part of his design. Mall full of axe murderers. We're not privy to the exact reason why Death needed Nick to live a little longer, but it's implied that he stayed in control of Nick's fate the whole time. That also means he had to come up with some wacky death traps for the others who escaped the initial disaster, but our man can handle it now. He's a pro. This continues on into Final Destination 5. Now, I know technically number 5 is a stealth prequel and occurs chronologically before any of the earlier movies, but I don't think Death works in linear time the way we do. I think he works more in threads of fate, if that makes sense. And it better, because it's kind of what holds together this whole thing I'm trying to do. In number 5, Death continues to use his experience to keep things tidy and concise. Namely, he uses Sam's premonition to keep him alive long enough to end up on Flight 180, the site of Death's very first big work project. Economical. Management is gonna eat it up. The popular theory is that if Sam had died in the bridge collapse, his girlfriend Molly, who was never going to die on the bridge, wouldn't be on the flight, and she is the actual intended victim of Death's designs. Death does begin to get a little cocky again now that he's more comfortable with the system. In this film, the gang of survivors learn that they can escape death by killing someone else, thus trading places and taking on their lifespan. And Death has a lot of fun with this, seeming to throw survivor Nathan a bone by giving him an asshole coworker to do a little baby manslaughter on, then waits till the very moment Nathan finds out this guy had a health condition that was gonna kill him anyway, to drop a flaming tire on the poor fella. He does become the longest lasting black survivor though, so yay, equality. I mean, in Bloodlines you find out that Bloodworth hasn't beat by a long shot, but Bloodworth is built different. He refuses to be a victim, okay? Speaking of Bloodlines, let's talk about Death's biggest fuck up to date. He walks into this one feeling great about himself. He has not had anyone escape since the second movie. He's got a hang of these premonition things. What could possibly go wrong? This bitch. This is where I edit in a picture of Iris. My theory is Iris was supposed to get her initial premonition, and she was supposed to do what every other protagonist has done and get out. Get off this panorama nightmare tower, grab her fiancé and a few others, and let everyone else die like a good little chess pawn. Then after fulfilling some greater purpose, creating a chain event that causes either someone else to die or not die, whatever the case may be, Death would kill her and the others off in a timely manner. This girl was not supposed to stop the whole damn disaster from happening, thus creating dozens of survivors for Death to deal with. And because the lineup is so long, these people have time to start popping out babies. And it's the 60s. They don't call them baby boomers because they act like babies when you don't accept their expired coupons at Walmart. They are an actual explosion of babies, and not the kind of explosion that Death is so fond of. To his credit, Death does not throw in the towel. He pursues this lengthy chain of survivors for 60 years. But you know, whatever higher-ups he answers to are not happy about what was supposed to be a quick project turning into a long-term cleanup job. Death probably has a bunch of colleagues in other departments who are responsible for other elements of fate, like love or finances, who now have to deal with the ripple actions of generations of people who are not supposed to be there to deal with. For someone who made their entire career about tying up loose ends, Death is embarrassed, Death is tired, and Death is a little bit bitter. This is why Death decides to do something that he's never done before and break one of his own rules, taking out a person who was not supposed to be on his list. Now, some have speculated that the reason Eric was killed, despite not being a blood relative to Iris, is because his mother never would have had the affair if she hadn't been married to Iris's son. I think this is a level of removal Death is not concerned with right now when he's got a mess of hundreds of direct victims already. Plus, there's no reason why if Eric was part of the chain, he would die after his younger sister, but before his younger brother. The reason for his demise is Death is feeling petty. He is on the last family tree of this half-a-century mess, and this dude, despite not being involved at all thanks to his mom's thought era, is trying to pull the same loophole bullshit that led Death to his only other major failure, the survival of Kim and Burke in the second movie. So Death takes out Eric and the rest of the Campbell family, which leads him to his last survivor, whose fate we don't see, but whose face we know well, William Bloodworth. Bloodworth is a character who has walked so close to death his entire life that he made his living as a mortician and his hobby terrifying hot young horror movie protagonists. Until Bloodline, many assumed that he was Death or an agent of, maybe an unpaid intern. By the time Death gets to him for surviving the non-disaster when he was 6, Bloodworth already has a terminal illness. Iris also has cancer when we meet her in the present day, and she states this is finally Death catching up with her, but both her and Death seem to agree that he doesn't actually win unless he gets to kill her in the gnarly fashion that he is accustomed to. Bloodworth doesn't have this concern. Maybe he'll die of his illness, maybe he'll die in an accident, but either way, he still lived a pretty full life. Does Death really get to claim victory at all at this point? Or is this big project a big old failure, a stain on his illustrious career, even if he succeeds in technically crossing every name off the list? One thing is for sure, the bonus isn't looking good this year. Maybe Death will be able to look at Bloodworth's approach to not letting Death's designs consume him and take that note for himself. Develop some work-life balance, or death-life balance in this case. Maybe Death never had any higher-ups to answer to at all, only pressure from himself to constantly succeed and never let anyone else get the better of him. Maybe he needs to let loose a little and not beat himself up about letting one or two measly mortals escape his plan, or for squashing a goth in an MRI machine when he was feeling a little bit grumpy. But how do you guys feel about Death in the Final Destination films? Do you admire his hustle, or is his grind culture kind of cringe? Are you simply not getting the big office vibes I'm putting down? Would you put Death's scythe in Jell-O? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe. And as always, have a delicious day before it's too late. This should be skull related.